Hello, my name is Sydney Walters. I'm going to be talking about the most costly hurricanes to ever hit the United States. What could you buy with 178.8 billion American dollars? You could buy approximately 1,788 aircraft missions at SpaceX, or you could buy about 46 NFL teams. That amount of money is just like almost crazy to wrap your mind around. I've spent a lot of time in the past few weeks researching these hurricanes, and after living in Florida myself, hurricanes have just become like very interesting to me, and I never had to live through one there. I only lived through like a couple tropical storms, but I always just thought that hurricanes were just very interesting. Hurricanes can be very expensive to clean up after they take their community. It can often leave them wrecked without much left standing. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane that left Louisiana just destroyed in its past. 3 years after Hurricane Katrina happened, the state of Louisiana was still trying to put themselves back together. When President Bush visited New Orleans in August of 2008, he said he saw signs of progress in the city, which pretty much meant that they were working on rebuilding it, and it had started happening. But it wasn't what it was, and I feel like after a hurricane really ravages a city, they're never what they really were. The city can be rebuilt, but it's never the same as what it was. After Katrina hit, New Orleans residents still lacked adequate medical care and other basic necessities that a state needs to live, a community needs to live. Mississippi reported, so it mainly ravaged Louisiana, but it also hit parts of Mississippi and other surrounding areas. And Mississippi reported that the infrastructure still remained in disarray and that businesses are still suffering in the state a year later. And that is just like crazy to think about. According to the National Center for Environmental Information, it has totally costed around $178.8 billion to repair the states and everything that were affected by Hurricane Katrina. This makes it the most costliest hurricane to hit the United States to this date. To put this into perspective, Bill Gates' net worth in 2001 was approximately $131 billion. So Bill Gates could have spent all of his money and he would not have been able to repair what it costs to repair after Hurricane Katrina. There's a lot that goes into the cost of cleaning up a hurricane. They need technicians working around the clock to restore power and cable, and they need state and federal government's help in providing just general cleanup and food and supplies and basic hygiene needs and shelters, because a lot of these people lose their homes and they don't have anywhere else to go. Their cars are ruined and they're just basically stuck somewhere where they don't have the basic needs to survive. Sometimes homeowners even have to pay deductibles to get their homes fixed, and sometimes there's no fixing their home and they just have to get a new home altogether. Now that we've discussed Hurricane Katrina, we can move on to the second costliest hurricane to ever hit the United States. The next one we're talking about is Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey affected much of Texas as it turned into a Category 4 hurricane before landfall. Its top winds surged to about 130 miles per hour with heavy rains and massive storm surges that swamped coastal areas. 130 miles per hour, that is so fast. Like, cars don't even drive that fast as these winds were going. Like, could you imagine getting hit with 130 mile per hour winds? It made landfall on Texas on August 25th, 2017, and it caused about 103 indirect deaths. It wasn't downgraded to a tropical depression until 5 days later on August 30th, but it still continued to dump massive amounts of rain on parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. An estimated 13 million people were affected by Hurricane Harvey, Nearly 135,000 homes were damaged or destroyed in this historic flooding, and nearly 1 million cars were wrecked. Like, it's just crazy how much damage a hurricane can really bring to an area. And that's why I just feel so lucky sometimes to live in Minnesota, because we don't have to deal with like the hurricanes, and like the worst we get here is like a snowstorm. But they get like their homes wrecked, they get flooded, they get personal important stuff just taken away from them. According to the NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information, in consultation with the National Hurricane Center, Hurricane Harvey ended up costing $138.8 billion. It took about 3 months of cleanup, followed by 20 months of recovery and remodeling. So it took about 2 years to even get close to where they were before, pretty much. President Trump issued a major disaster declaration immediately and allowed dozens of federal agencies to adding personnel to support Texas in their response and recovery, because they needed a lot of help after this. Within days, the number of FEMA employees and other agencies and National Guard topped 31,000, all focused on helping Texas respond to Hurricane Harvey. More than 19 trillion gallons of rainfall fell on parts of Texas, causing widespread flooding. The Houston area experienced the largest amount of rainfall ever recorded in the continental U.S. from a single storm, 51.8 inches. That's just crazy. Now we will move on to the third most costly hurricane to hit the United States. Hurricane Maria made landfall on Puerto Rico's southeast coast on September 22nd, 2017. The storm first hit the Dominican Republic and caused widespread destruction as a Category 5 storm, and it alternated between Category 4 and a Category 5 as it hit Puerto Rico. Category 5 hurricane is pretty much the worst hurricane that you can hit an area. As it approached Puerto Rico, they were still trying to repair and clean up after Hurricane Irma, which I'm sure you've heard about when it raged through Florida, and they spent a lot of money cleaning up that one too, but it just didn't make the top 3. Although they had missed the worst of the storm, it still brought lots of rain and wind gusts of up to 100 miles per hour. According to the news, Irma had already left roughly 2/3 of the population without electricity and roughly 1/3 without clean water. Like, those are like the basic needs to survive, is clean drinking water, and the electricity isn't as much needed as the clean water, but like it's still very important to have so you can clean your water or just make it through. When Maria hit, it severely damaged about 95% of cell phone towers, cutting off communication from the rest of the world. It also destroyed what was still functioning in the electrical grid after Irma, leaving all the residents across the island completely without power. Like, could you imagine like being without power in your home? Like, I mean, our power goes out for like a few hours here, and people like complain and they're upset, and I get it too, because up north, like, you really need your power for like heat and like to stay warm, to keep your house like heated. But could you imagine being without it for weeks? Like, and not being able to contact your family. Like, your family doesn't know if you're safe, your family doesn't know if you're alive. 95% of the cell phone towers are out, so they have no idea how you are doing. Hurricane Maria ended up costing about $99.9 billion in cleanup, making it the third most costliest hurricane to hit the United States. Hurricane Maria's damage has been severe and lasting. The storm caused an unknown amount of structural damage and destroyed nearly all the road signs and traffic. So pretty much after Irma hit and then Maria hit, they pretty much had to start from the beginning and make new roads, rebuild all the houses, rebuild cell phone towers, rebuild power, rebuild everything, starting completely from scratch, pretty much. It wiped out nearly all the roads, leaving less than 8% of them open a month later. Less than 8% open a month later. After 5 months of the storm, 25% of the residents did not have electricity. So for over a month, 25% of the residents did not have any electricity. After about 7 months, 96% of the residents had finally restored their electricity, and roughly still 62,000 people remained without power. I just can't even imagine, like, we take it for granted here, I feel like, because we have it and, like, it goes out for a few hours and we're sad and everyone's complaining, but, like, in Puerto Rico, they were without power for a month. 7 months. Roughly, after 7 months, 62,000 people still didn't have power. To sum it up, hurricanes have cost the United States, and mainly the southern United States, a lot of money in the last few years. They can be very deadly and life-destroying. I could not imagine losing your life, your personal artifacts, your historical artifacts from a natural, uncontrollable disaster like described. Many families not only lose their homes, but they lose all their valuables and irreplaceable items. This can devastate communities and entire families. And that's why hurricanes are so scary, I think, because, like, at least up here, we have, like I said, we have blizzards up here. We have huge snowstorms that leave it so you can't drive, but at least you can stay at home, and usually the power doesn't go out for too long. But after a hurricane, like, you can lose your whole family to a flood. Like, the cell phone towers can go out and you can't reach them and you don't know if they're okay. And I just think that would be so scary to live through.